Gentlemen, when we come on, I'm going to do
Yes.
my theme song first. Okay, you ready to go? The music you are about to hear is the theme song for the program Wave Your Grades. We welcome you this afternoon on Saturday, November 27th. Wave Your Grades. American students striving for excellence in honor of our troops. I am Carl Boyd, your host for Wave Your Grades. On Wave Your Grades. That theme song is called Wave Your Grades, and it challenges our young people in schools across the United States of America to excel in honor of those who serve and those who have served. Today's program is dedicated to such an individual. His name, Carl Evans, a distinguished veteran, and we have two very special guests who will let you know the many ways that he is distinguished primarily for the three of us as an educator, which is our field, but also as a person. Welcome to brothers David Griffin and Curtis Rogers on Wave Your Grades. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this day.
You're quite welcome, Carl.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let me tell you, it is such an honor. The gentleman who is on controls and was getting us together for today's program is Louis George Walker, founder of KUAW.org, president of the Black Family Technology Awareness Association. And as I mentioned to you in my email, had not checked to make sure that we were on for the holiday weekend. He is gracious enough to join us in the studio. So, Brother Walker, these gentlemen were not contacted for the program until last night and agreed to be on this day. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, what I would like to do is begin the program by offering a sincere thank you to the family of Carl Evans, who allowed our participation, you who are alpha men, I as a friend to the family and others who were there. The family of Carl Evans conduct themselves with such class, and this program is dedicated to Carl Evans. Gentlemen, you might want to say something along those lines yourselves. Either of you, please go right ahead.
Go right ahead, Dave.
Well, I want to say, we've all heard the song, the lyrics, "The Good Die Young," and that is certainly befitting of Brother Carl Evans. That not only did as it relates to him, the good dying young, Carl lived the example for all of us, young and old. He was a mentor to me. He was a mentor to many educators in the Kansas City School District and to his community. He is a pillar of of hope for those who are coming behind him. And so I just want to initially say that it was my privilege not only to serve beside him as an alpha man, but to serve beside Carl as an educator. And so he, without a doubt, was an example. He was a model, if you will, for those of us to follow.
And I would simply say that Carl was just a wonderful individual. Did a lot of wonderful things, not only in the educational community, but also the civic community. Perhaps in the last 20 years or so, Carl was able to bring a lot of very diverse groups together to discuss issues that we were having in our community. But just a tremendous loss. And I think the one thing that I did mention a couple of days ago, Carl never sought attention, never. And he always put himself kind of in the background, but never up front. And that's just the kind of individual Carl Evans was.
Go ahead. Okay, let me start again because, okay, I think I'm all right now. Brothers David Griffin and Curtis Rogers, I would echo what you are saying, and I think that I was talking about the fact that
Carl is speaking, I can't hear him.
Was a gentleman who knew how to lead from behind.
Neither can I.
Curtis Rogers, you are so right. He never sought spotlight. He never stepped in front of somebody else so that he could be heard or seen. He was a master at pushing other people forward. At his
Brother George,
services,
is Carl speaking?
We heard a testimony from Brother Terry Riley, who, when he was in T-shirt King, and
yes,
was getting a tire.
Yes, he is.
That is.
Yes, he's speaking.
I can't hear anything. David, I can't hear that.
Yeah, Curtis, I can hear you. I can't hear Carl nor Brother George.
I'm sorry, I'm hesitating because.
Okay, they said they can't hear you.
Right, so I would be happy to start over again after they nod in the direction of being able to hear me. So, gentlemen, please let me know at that point when I am coming through. Now, I could change microphones, I don't know.
Don't change microphones.
Don't change microphones? Okay. I shall continue on this particular microphone, and we shall see.
All right, you guys are hearing me now, right?
I can hear you.
Carl as well.
Oh, you can hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yes.
Oh,
I can hear you too, George.
I was saying that I recall at the services for Carl Evans the remarks of a young Terry Riley and how his first visit to T-shirt King, where you might not expect it, here was Carl Evans encouraging him then. And that was just typical of the remarks that we heard. Let me ask David Griffin and Curtis Rogers, Van Horn High School, Fairview, how the evolution of educational concerns has impacted your personal careers. And then I want to talk about how Carl Evans was able to transcend from decades ago to this current time. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of educational concerns. David Griffin.
Well, in speaking, Carl, regarding Van Horn, it was a transitional period.
He's answering. Oh.
Regarding Van Horn, in many regards, it was a transitional period for young black students because that was an era during the 6C desegregation plan, where, as you know, young Black students from the intercity, as it is called, or was called, was moved to transported to Van Horn High School, to a predominantly white institution at that time. And it was a challenging time because the young people did not feel that they were a part of the educational system at that time. So it was a challenge to get them to understand, no matter where you are, no matter what the conditions are, you put forth the best efforts that you possibly can, because it is your education that is at stake. And I think over a period of time, with the parents coming together, the parents from Central High School and the parents at Van Horn come together and said, these are in fact our kids, and we must do all that we can to help them reach the height of education that they possibly can. And especially for those individuals, those young people who were Black, because unfortunately, as it was at that particular time, they were not welcomed with open arms. And being the first African-American assistant principal at the school before I became the principal, like them, I was not welcome as well. But I tried to be an example to them. At one point, Brother Curtis Rogers became one of my assistant principals, so he lived through that particular era as well, trying to help them understand that the important thing is to get an education, no matter what the conditions might be. And I think they certainly lived up to that challenge during those turbulent times.
Tenure as principal at Van Horn, and I have a remark like this for both David Griffin and Curtis Rogers. Let me start with the voice we just heard, David Griffin, by saying, you invited me to a program at Van Horn High School. You wanted the students in the auditorium. Your fellow administrators and teachers wanted to know where they needed to stand in the auditorium to make sure that proper decorum was followed. Principal David Griffin said, no, this is for the students. You don't have to stand anywhere in the auditorium. And Principal David Griffin conducted that assembly with no other adults than you and I, and the students' behavior was impeccable because that's the kind of belief that you showed in them.
Absolutely.
So,
It was a time called when showing love and concern was at the height of my agenda, that I had to trust in them to behave as I knew they would.
and they did.
Because they had a very distinguished guest in the person of yourself, Mr. Carl Boyd. So I appreciate you remembering that. But you know, when you give students the reins to say, hey, you take control of your behavior because I trust you to do so. And that's exactly what they did.
Now imagine that Carl Evans provided the climate that would allow me to interview you two gentlemen who have that belief in young people in common, because there were those who said, Curtis Rogers, you're at Fairview with those young people? To which Curtis Rogers would help them to understand what, Brother Rogers, if you would?
You know, Carl, you know, the old saying that, you know, if you get lemons, you make lemonade. When I came to Fairview in 1980 as principal, I had had a couple of years experience as an acting principal of the alternative school, but when I came to Fairview, there were no programs. There were no established programs. There was no counseling, extensive counseling available to students. The curriculum was just very basic. So my goal was to really build a program, that helped the students that I work with. And not only that, not only to build a program, but to build the kind of a faculty that you really needed to work with the students. Mm-hmm. So over a period of time, I was able to really build that program, to bring in the kind of teachers that were very effective. And when I retired in 2002, we had a solid program. And in fact, Carl, as you remember, I even brought you in one time to talk with my staff. But we're able to build an excellent program over at Fairview. So much so to the extent where I found myself probably 5 or 6 years before I retired, I found myself, other folks were coming in from all over the country trying to find out what I was doing. And I was spending a lot of time with other persons of other school districts trying to figure out what I was doing to be so effective and so successful in my program. Well, we really work with kids. And Carl, I think the one thing that I would mention is that once kids came to Fairview, after they had been there a semester or a year, many parents did not want them to leave. And I always had to, someone always had to leave so I could make room for other students to enter the program. But we had a good program at Fairview, very successful program.
Excellent.
You know, now this is pretty amazing to me. And 2 words, only God. Only God. Let us think about the climate and this opportunity to speak together created by Carl Evans, and I'm not making it up. Someone says David Griffin introducing black students to this particular venue, Curtis Rogers, Fairview, and here was Carl Evans at Chester Anderson. Mm-hmm. So that you had a camaraderie born out of more than a fraternal affiliation, more than a family affiliation, but professionally, wouldn't it be wonderful today if somehow we could capture this and pass it on in a climate like Carl Evans created in his home, where we could not only discuss it, but pass this baton on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things you hear educators indicate is that failure is not an option. Well, it is an option, because through failure comes success.
Wow.
And I think we have all, I don't think any of us have ever reached a level of any success without going through some stage of failure. And I say that to say that we instill in kids, it's okay to fail, because if you failed, it means you have tried. And therefore, I never indicate to students at any level that failure is absolute, because it's not absolute, but it is a pathway to success. And it means that you are trying. So, you know, Curtis and I, as we work together with Carl Evans, is to make sure that we do everything to make students aware that we are behind them 100%, that we care about them, and we will not allow failure to be an absolute, but we will allow failure as a means to success.
So
you know, Carl, one of the things that I found out as principal at Fairview, and usually the students were always assigned to Fairview. They did not come on their own, they were assigned. But one of the things that I did find out, a lot of those kids had a lot of intelligence and a lot of brilliance. They had never had the opportunity to express it. And in many cases, it perhaps had never been successful. But I think for kids to be able to realize success in their educational journey, just to be successful, is very important.
Yeah. And as Brother Griffin was saying, failure is not finishing.
Absolutely.
Failure represents the opportunity. And when both of you gentlemen indicated that you allowed me to be a guest at your schools, I was there to observe and learn as someone coming in. And please, I know, Curtis, you can help me with this, and perhaps David even visited some of this. My wife and I were in Arizona from 1999 until 2010. And Brother Curtis, when I came back, Carl Evans was conducting meetings in his home. What were those meetings about, and how did they manifest?
Carl conducted a lot of meetings. One in particular, excuse me, one group in particular that I worked with was the retired administrators. And we were able to get that group going to assist the school district in whatever areas they needed. I know we were able to assist in providing leadership and guidance for some of their young principals. But that's one organization. Well, Carl had so many different groups, though.
Yes.
He had a lot of political groups. Carl had probably, I don't know how many groups he had, but he had a lot of them. And they had different focuses. I can remember when I decided to run for the Missouri House of Representatives in 2002 or 2004, Carl was very instrumental in trying to help me through that particular endeavor. And then when I ran for the school board, I think in 2012, in which I did win that one, Carl was also instrumental. But he just opened his home to so many different groups, and very diverse groups, might I say.
And when you started, Dave Griffin was nodding either in enlightenment or in agreement. Brother Griffin, please.
Yes, you know, I had the privilege of even at K-State, Kansas State University, after retiring from the school district, I did participate at least in one meeting at Carl's home on Prospect with the Retired Administrative Association, and my brother Curtis Rogers is absolutely on target. Carl was about, yes, you have retired and you earned that right to retire because you paid your dues, but your dues still have to be paid to those who are coming behind you. And like Curtis said, what can the retired successful administrators in Kansas City do to help those young administrators coming behind us to help them be successful? And successful to us meant if you help students be successful, then you are successful.
Yes.
So there was a tie to what successful was all about, and that was tied to students in Carl's mind.
And, Carl, let me just mention this now that I'm thinking about it. When we met at Carl's house, we met upstairs. We actually met upstairs.
Yes.
You know, where he lived.
Yes.
But Carl had the fortitude and understanding to know that even needed to grow. And Carl developed the whole downstairs, the first floor, the whole first floor as a meeting space where different groups could meet, and it was much bigger. So I just thought that was interesting how he was started, you know, in his living quarters upstairs, and then he was able to move downstairs and develop that whole first floor area into a complete meeting space.
Mm-hmm. Sure did. Wow. I might want to mention, Brother Boyd, about Carl's sense, his serious sense of helping young people be successful. Let me give you a very brief story. I'm at Kansas State University, and I was contacted by attorneys, lawyers, or whomever for charter schools. And Westport High School was under a chartership, but they needed a principal. Now, Carl Evans was retired, and he would tell you in a heartbeat how happy he was to retire. But we needed a principal to run that school at Westport High School. And my responsibility as a consultant, I was hired as a consultant, was to reach out to find someone that could run that school as a principal. And I thought long and hard, and I even talked to Curtis about this. I contacted Carl Evans, and I indicated to Brother Evans that I needed him to come out of retirement and run this school at Westport. But here's what I did. Even though I had in my mind someone to run the school to help students be successful, I did not say that to Carl. What I said to Carl was, I need someone to be a leader of those teachers, to get them on board, to establish curricula that would help students. And I did that whole resume, and Carl said, David, you know, man, I appreciate that, but I'm gonna have to decline. And I said, well, Carl, you know, they really need someone, man, that those kids can look up to. Now, when I brought those kids into the picture,
Yes.
verbally, because it was always mentally in my mind, but verbally, when I said to Carl, those students need a leader, they need a mentor, they need a model. Carl said, David, he said, I'm gonna do it, okay? He said, this is a true story, Carl, and Curtis would bear me to be true, and so the good Lord, when I mentioned students, helping students, someone that students can look up to as a model, as an example, as a beacon of light, Carl did not hesitate. He said, David, you got me. He said, I would do it. That was Carl.
I will say that in response to that, and Curtis Rogers will agree with it. If you had said something similar to Carl Evans about retired administrators, it would have been true. Someone to whom they could look up and would be a leader for retired administrators, modeling what current administrators need.
Absolutely.
One of the things that occurs to me, Brother Curtis, when you were talking about upstairs where the retired administrators were meeting, and the Tuesday meetings, which became Wednesday meetings in the afternoon, and coming downstairs, I had the occasion to say that I didn't refer to it as hospitality, but house-pitality, because this gentleman not only would take the time and the effort to make that edifice downstairs a welcome place for people to meet, but this is where this brother lived. This was not, Carl Evans, can we find a place? Carl Evans said, come on over here.
Yeah.
And in that regard, he was with the Black Agenda Group as well. And going beyond, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Am I coming across okay?
You are.
As well as he did as it relates to education, what were some of the kind of community things that the Black Agenda tackled, and for that matter, those meetings at his home?
You know, Carl, I think as our careers progressed, Carl, as well as mine, you know, we were young teachers and young administrators and principals. But I think sometimes you mature to another level.
Mm-hmm.
And that level is you begin to understand where change has to occur and how you can affect change and how you can be part of that decision-making process. And Carl and I both ran for the school board, and we both, I think, came on the school board in 2012. I served from 2012 to 2016, one term, and Carl served 2 terms. He served from 2012 to 2020. But I think both of us understood that you have to, sometimes you have to put yourself in a position where you can make change and be part of change and be part of that decision-making process. And I sat there for 4 years with Carl on the school board, and our voting record was probably 95% used the same way. We voted the same way probably 95% of the time. Occasionally we differed, but our philosophy was so similar. And we were able to make change. And we both work, I think, well with Dr. Stephen Green, but I think the important thing is we were part of the process that brought Dr. Mark Bedell, a great superintendent. We were part of that process that brought Dr. Bedell here to Kansas City. So I think we both understood that we had to move to another level where not only we can affect change, but we can make change and be part of that change process. And Carl, let me say this, about 4 years later, I guess, maybe somewhere around 2017 or so, we had a vacancy. I've been a trustee on the Kansas City Public School Retirement System, probably 25 years, and we had a vacancy. And I said, come on, Carl. I said, you need to serve. And we were able to bring Carl on the Kansas City Public School Retirement System as a trustee. And Carl served up until just a few weeks before his passing, but he served admirably in both those positions on the school board as well as the Kansas City Public School Retirement System.
If I may kind of piggyback on what Curtis just said in a very small way. As I read the life reflections at Carl Evans' homegoing, there was a little sentence that said Carl was a very free thinker. Now, and he was. Carl was not influenced, and I think this is why people gravitated to Carl, because they knew Carl could not be influenced unless he believed what he stood for. And Carl was an absolute powerhouse in standing alone and thinking things through and making a decision based on his own belief. And I think that's really a star on Carl's shoulders.
Carl, Dave, can I piggyback on that a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of pressure when you're sitting on that school board. You get a lot of pressure, and every time you have to make a major decision, you get a lot of phone calls, and you get a lot of different groups trying to influence your vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that Carl, as well as myself, we were in a position where our income was set, our retirement income was set. We did not work for anyone. We did not have to bow to any political pressure. And Carl simply made the decision always that was in the best interest of students.
Right.
Always in the best interest of students, and was able to, hear all the chatter, but move that aside and make the best decision for students and the constituents of this school district.
Right. What's best for students?
Always did.
Always.
That was Carl. He's the independent thinker.
Let me indicate to you that one of the things that I'm hearing very clearly from David Griffin and Curtis Rogers about Carl Evans on this day is there were a number of times when someone came to Carl. He was not a person who was looking to jump out front. He was not a person who would upstage someone else. And from what I'm hearing from David Griffin and Curtis Rogers is, on more than one occasion, someone had to solicit from him leadership because he was satisfied to push others into leadership, and on these occasions had to be convinced that no, you are the person and you are not upstaging, that you are needed.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to get from two retired administrators, but also leaders in the community, is this. I honestly believe that we owe Carl Evans a continuation as it relates to some of the things that he put forward. For instance, bringing people together in the way that he did. For instance, as much as Dr. Bedell, and were he here, he would agree with this, is admired throughout the community. If criticism were considered to be appropriate, Carl Evans would do that as well, and yet welcome you to his home. Are there ways that some who are younger might perpetuate the kind of leadership that Carl Evans began? What are some things we need to do now?
Carl was very unique. That old statement, leading from behind.
Yes, sir.
Carl led from behind.
Yes.
Carl, he never put himself out front. Never did. He never had to lead from the front, but he always knew which buttons to push, which folks to push up front. He just had that unique ability to be able to see things in people, to see the talents in people, and to be able to push those folks forward. He had that ability to thrust those folks forward that had the ability to really do and get things done. And he just led from behind.
Yes, sir.
He would be standing in the background while everybody else was up front.
I think in what you're saying, Curtis, when you look at when you read the reflection, his life reflection, to absolutely highlight what you've said, there's one area in his life reflection that simply says, Carl was always exactly what people needed him to be. And when you talk about lead from behind, that's what people needed Carl to do. Some people, when you see people pulling things, and you say, don't pull it, get behind it and push it. And that's what Carl did. Let me push you forward. And so when you say, Brother Curtis, that Carl led from behind, that's exactly what he did. And he was very effective at it.
And Dave, he didn't have any problem sometimes picking up that telephone and say, Kurt, I got something, I've got a favor I need to ask you. And he would say, I need you to do this.
Uh-huh.
He had no problem in picking up the telephone and asking folks to do certain things. That was another unique ability I think that Carl had. And I think he had the kind of reputation and sincerity that if he asked you to do something, it wasn't a fluke. If he asked you to do something, you had to seriously consider what he was asking.
Yeah.
And when he asked me, usually I said yes. Very few times I said, Carl, I can't do it.
Let me mention, because of time, that I do not want to get away from the fact that Carl Evans was a distinguished veteran from the Vietnam era. Mm-hmm. And if you were with Carl Evans for the past few, not couple, but for the past few decades, he never mentioned heroism. He did not complain, and he and other Vietnam veterans had every right to complain, but you didn't see that in him. But I was so pleased that he was the first person nominated, and I'll tell you what it is. This program called Wave Your Grades every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. generally features secondary students and veterans. It is veterans motivating students and students reporting how they are striving for excellence in honor of our troops. This program issued an appeal to students to name heroes you didn't know were heroes.
Yeah.
And I am suggesting to young people, there's a custodian who is fixing the lights, who is sweeping the floor in your school, who was in Afghanistan. There's a cafeteria worker, and all she does is provide menus and make sure that your food is what it ought to be. And here's a lady who came out a hard sergeant in the Army, and you didn't know it. But when I issued that appeal to find heroes you didn't know were heroes, Miss Syria Shields was the young lady who gave our first nomination in the name of Carl Evans. And one of the most important aspects of the essay written by Syria Shields, you gentlemen will not be surprised, was her saying he taught by example. We are educators, and we know that children learn more by example than they do by instruction.
Absolutely.
Even upon being nominated, he was shaking his head as if to say, you don't mean me. Now, at least 100 people in the room unshook his head. Shook ours in the affirmative. And had there been 12 times as many people in the room. Go ahead, David Griffin. I see you smiling, but this is our Carl Evans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Carl was very befitting, a hero that you didn't know was a hero. Carl constantly would say, and maybe not in these exact words, but he would constantly say to young people, what do you want to be? And how do you want to get there? What do you want to be in life? When you get to be an adult, even though they thought they were adults when he was talking to them. And regardless of what they told him, regardless of what their responses were, regardless of what they aspired to be, he said, how are you going to get there?
Yes.
What stairways are you going to build to get there? And what Carl actually did say, regardless of the height of the tallest building in the world, there has to be a foundation. There has to be a foundation. Otherwise, what's at top would never happen. And so he instilled in young people, build a foundation to get to where you want to be. Build that foundation, build that self-esteem within yourselves. Find someone that you can emulate, that you can talk to, that you feel is a mentor, a positive mentor for yourselves. And when Carl was saying that, not knowing it, he was talking about himself because kids looked up to him.
Say this himself, but there are 3 gentlemen on this call, Curtis Rogers, David Griffin, and Carl Boyd, who would have our listeners to know a Carl Evans whose bell could ring. It was not a retired administrator. It was not a fraternity member. It was not the superintendent of schools. It was a young person whom he had taught who were in need and knew that they could ring the bell of Carl Evans. Mm-hmm. And he would assist immediately or point the way, but never turn anybody away. So that's that hero you didn't know was a hero, because he would never divulge that. And if you were not there, just by the way happened to be in the house when he did it, you wouldn't know that. Mm-hmm. But how many people have said Carl Evans is chasing trash down the street on Prospect Avenue, that there are people who were reluctant about, ooh, you're on Prospect, and the people of Prospect have the greatest of regard and respect for our Carl Evans. I hate to say it, but we're running out of time, and I want to do two things. I want to call upon Louis George Walker to let those who are with us know how they can access the program later on, what the Black Family Technology Awareness Association and KUAW.org are all about, and after he lets people know how they can access and what kind of programs there are, I will ask David Griffin and Curtis Rogers for closing remarks about Brother Carl Evans. But here is Louis George Walker, please. And there are a number of ways. Brother Walker, can you help us out? Accessing KUAW.
All right. Well, thank you, Carl. I am glad to be able to relate to everyone. This has been a great show and great enthusiasm from the people that are speaking in memory of Carl Evans.
Yes.
So that's been great. You're listening to KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. We're right here in Kansas City, located in the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center, 4510 East Linwood Boulevard. And you can pick us up when we do live shows like this. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And you can also pick us up on the audio side. We're on the online radio bot. We're on TuneIn. If you have an Amazon or Google speaker, you can tell it to play KUAW, and you'll hear us right there. So there's a lot of ways you can pick us up. We're on the internet. We're around the world. So knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, KUAW. That's our call signs. We're on the air 24/7. We also bring you some of the best in jazz and blues and a lot of local talk shows. So tune in daily. And also remember to pick up Carl Boyd here every Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. Sometimes we fight a little bit with the technology, but we get it out there.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for listening.
Thank you, and I would like to hear, gentlemen, whomever wants to go first, but closing remarks on Wave Your Grades, November 27th, about Carl Evans.
You know, one of the things that Carl and I would sometimes be together, and students will come up and say, "Hi, Mr. Evans." And Carl and I both talked about it. It's always, kids will remember you by the way you treat them. If you treat them well, they'll remember you. And we talk about that often.
And I would just add on to that, Curtis, Carl will always agree to the fact that students may not always remember what you try to teach them, even though we want them to, but they will never, ever forget how you treated them.
That's right.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My privilege just a couple of days ago was to make remarks, and I said that if I had a title, it would be "Don't Just Give It, Live It." Carl Evans gave us all so much, and we will never forget that. But he wasn't just a giver. He was an example setter, and we will never forget. In fact, we will try to live as he lived, being the example he would want us to be. I cannot thank enough, especially with that short notice and patience with Brother Walker and me. As far as the technology was concerned, Brother Walker, you and I will agree it was worth the wait.
Yes.
Because this is a very important program, and we will learn and communicate how you can call it up later. Thank you, David Griffin, Curtis Rogers.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. My privilege.
Our good brother, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. He's a member of the Alpha Pi Alpha fraternity. We are yet brothers. My name is Carl Boyd. Gracious God and wonderful Wanda. I'm on my way home.